Lash Canino, the brown man. Brown suit, brown shirt, brown car, brown girl he had too.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today on Classic Movie Rev, we are taking on The Big Sleep, 1978. Before we get going, I want to remind you to follow the links in the show notes or from the site to visit our store. This film has a plethora of great stars, including Robert Mitchum, possibly the king of film noir, great actor Jimmy Stewart, Richard Boone, who is excellent at being a bad guy, and if you doubt this, see The Shootist 1976. From the other side of the pond, there is Sarah Miles, Oliver Reed, Harry Anderson, Joan Collins, and John Mills. The story is based on a Raymond Chandler novel, plus Bogey and Bacall showed how the line should be delivered in the original version of this movie, The Big Sleep, 1946. This film had everything going for it and should be great. There are multiple scenes of Candy Clark totally nude, which is something you would think would at least make this movie interesting. When Clark tries to be petulant, her acting is so bad, it seems like she's spoofing a toddler. All the other actors seem like they're sleepwalking through the film. On IMDb.com, the film is rated 5.8. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a 67% on the tomato meter and only 27% audience approval. This number seems about right for this film. Englishman Michael Winner was the director. He directed 42 films. I went through the list, and the only films of merit are Chado's Land 1972, The Mechanic 1972, Scorpio 1973, The Stone Killer 1973, Death Wish 1974, and Death Wish 3 1985. So, I guess his directing style is to put Charles Bronson or Oliver Reed on the screen and let them entertain the viewers. Great film critic Roger Ebert rated this movie 2.5 stars and said in a March 24, 1978 review, quote, "But now we come to the case of The Big Sleep 1978 with Robert Mitchum stepping into Bogey's shoes. The movie isn't a classic, but it does make sense. Does it ever? We get Mitchum's voice explaining things on the soundtrack, and we get flashbacks to remind us of key scenes, and when characters confess to a crime, we get scenes picturing them. And yet, the movie's over, and we're still mystified. Chandler's plot is so complicated that maybe Hawks was right in 1946 when he ignored the loopholes. What really matters in a movie like this isn't plot anyway, it's style. How the characters talk to each other, and wear their clothes, and smoke cigarettes, and hold guns. The style in the new Big Sleep is confined mostly to 3 actors, Mitchum, Candy Clark, and Richard Boone. This movie is disappointing otherwise. It was directed by Michael Winner, who can hold our attention when he wants to, as in Death Wish, but here, despite all the great costumes and sets and London locations they're given to work with, these actors don't seem engaged," unquote. New York Times film critic Janet Maslin said in a March 15, 1978 review, quote, "Howard Hawks directed the 1946 version of The Big Sleep in black and white, so it is conceivable that Mr. Hawks didn't furnish Philip Marlowe's bedroom with color-coordinated sheets and blankets merely because he wasn't able to. However, it is also conceivable that Mr. Hawks chose deliberately to depict Marlowe as something other than an immaculately appointed fellow with a decorating flair. Michael Winner's new film version of the Raymond Chandler novel concentrates so heavily on the dapper side of Marlowe that it makes the first version look like an unmade bed, which may be what it was meant to look like after all. There are no shadows in the senselessly gaudy remake. There isn't much nighttime either, and there isn't any rain. There isn't any Los Angeles, because Mr. Winner, pretending to switch the story setting to London for no intelligible reason, seems actually to have transferred it to a succession of furniture store showrooms. Not a single prop looks used, not even the dainty china cups put off when Marlowe drinks his morning coffee," unquote. So, all that doesn't bode well. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
The great actor and film noir specialist Robert Mitchum played private investigator Philip Marlowe. This great actor was first covered in Out of the Past, 1947. Another great actor, Jimmy Stewart, played the dying General Sternwood. He came off in this role like he was dying. Stewart was first covered in It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. Richard Boone played the small role of the Brown Man, Killer Lash Canino. Boone was first covered in The Alamo, 1960. John Mills was Inspector Carson, and James Donald was Inspector Gregory, both of Scotland Yard. Mills was briefly covered in Goodbye Mr. Chips, 1939, and Donald was covered in The Vikings, 1958. Sarah Miles played spoiled rich girl Charlotte Sternwood. Miles was born in England in 1941. Watch out for those bombs. She graduated from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. Miles's first film was released in 1962, but it took until 1970 with the release of Ryan's Daughter to make her especially well known. Ryan's Daughter 1970 was an adaptation of Madame Bovary set in the post-1916 Easter Rebellion, Ireland. Her husband wrote it. Her subsequent success was The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing 1973. Later, she was in The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea 1976, which asked the perennial question, can Chris Christopherson act with his clothes on? Of course, she was in The Big Sleep 1978, with the next quality film being Hope and Glory 1987. She continues to act intermittently, with her last credit coming in 2016. Candy Clark played the drug-addicted nymphomaniac rich girl Camilla Sternwood. Clark was born in Oklahoma in 1947. She graduated from Trimble Tech High School in Fort Worth, Texas. At the age of 18, she began working as a model in New York. Clark began her film career in the John Huston-directed Fat City 1972. In her next film, American Graffiti 1973, she played pretty but silly Debbie Dunham, who spent the night riding with Terry the Toad. She was nominated for a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for this role. She worked on television, and her next big movie was The Man Who Fell to the Earth 1976. She was in The Big Sleep 1978 and the not-too-good More American Graffiti 1979. She specialized in playing silly blondes in these and other movies like Blue Thunder 1983. Clark continues to appear in film and television. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
American private investigator Philip Marlowe, Robert Mitchum, is living in England. He drives his convertible sports car through the country towards the Sternwood estates. Just before he arrives, a woman in another sports car zooms past him on the narrow road. Marlowe's inner dialogue talks of him being dressed appropriately and being sober for the visit. Marlowe is watched by a young man who is washing cars as he approaches the manor. The butler, Norris, Harry Anderson, I'm glad it's not the judge from Night Court 1984 to 92, allows him into the foyer to wait while he announces to General Sternwood, Jimmy Stewart, that his guest has arrived. The general is an American officer that returned to England following the death of his wife. Jimmy Stewart was the first major Hollywood star to attempt to enlist. He eventually joined the Army Air Corps and flew missions over Nazi Germany. Before the end of the war, he made full bird colonel and later became a brigadier general in the United States Air Force Reserve. Back in the hallway, Camilla Sternwood, Candy Clark, comes in trying to be sexy. The lines fall on the floor as she was nowhere as good as Debbie Dunham in American Graffiti 1973. Camilla eventually falls onto Marlowe, forcing him to catch her. As Camilla tries to kiss him, Norris returns to take Marlowe to the general. The car wash guy is still giving Marlowe the stink eye. The general is in a wheelchair. He says he has lived a life of excess and now he's paying for his actions.
You're looking at a rather dull survival of a gaudy life. Cripple, both legs paralyzed, and just half his lower belly.
He spends his time in the greenhouse so he can stay warm. Marlowe has been recommended by Inspector Carson, John Mills. The general has two daughters, Camilla, the younger wild one, and the older, more stable, Charlotte, Sarah Miles. Charlotte was married to an Irishman named Rusty Regan, David Seville. The general says he is very fond of Rusty. Rusty has been missing for a month. The general says he is being blackmailed again. He had previously paid Joe Brody, Edward Fox, £5,000 to leave his daughter Camilla alone. Marlowe examines the new blackmail request. They are a series of notes signed by Camilla to a man named Arthur Geiger, John Justice. Marlowe recommends that the general pay what are described as gambling debts. The general refuses, and Marlowe says he will come down on Geiger. Norris tells Marlowe that Charlotte wants to see him. She's in a nightgown, and Charlotte thinks Marlowe has been hired to find Rusty. Marlowe won't give any information. Charlotte wants to know if Marlowe could find Rusty. She mentions that his car was found in a hotel parking lot. Marlowe brushes up on some rare book information before going to Geiger's rare book and first editions. The clerk in the store is Agnes Lazelle, Joan Collins. He asks her about some rare books to find out that she knows nothing about books.
Can I help you?
You have a Chevalier Audubon 1840, the full set?
Not at the moment, no.
What about a Ben-Hur 1860? The one with the erratum on page 116.
I'm afraid not.
You do sell books.
What does this look like? A banana?
Marlowe says he will wait until Geiger returns. Shortly, a man comes in with a package and is buzzed into the back room. A young man furtively admits him to the back. The man leaves with a single book. Marlowe follows the man. The man hides in the bushes but then runs away, accidentally leaving his book behind. Marlowe retrieves the book, and it is schoolgirl porn, but not actually underage stuff. In the book and film, The Big Sleep 1946, Geiger is a peddler of gay pornography, which was highly secretive in the 70s. Marlowe sees Geiger arrive at the bookstore and be warmly greeted by the young man from the back room. The young guy leaves with Geiger's car. The young man returns to pick up Geiger a few hours later. Marlowe trails him to a house and waits outside. Much later, Camilla, who is slightly staggering, arrives in a sports car. Marlowe sees a camera flash going off inside and hears Camilla laughing. From inside, 3 shots are fired. Marlowe breaks in and finds Geiger dead on the floor. Camilla is nude and sitting blankly in front of the camera, having been shot up with an opioid. Marlowe covers the semi-crazed Camilla. He checks the rest of the house and finds an appointment book. Marlowe delivers the passed-out Camilla to Norris at the Sternwood estate. He takes a cab back to the murder site and the body is gone. The scene switches to a dock and a fancy car crashing through the rails into the water. In the morning, Marlowe examines the book from the murder house. He thinks it's coded blackmail information. Inspector Carson calls from Scotland Yard to ask if Marlowe knows why the General's Bentley and a man are at the bottom of the ocean. Inspector Carson and Marlowe go to the scene of the car crash. The car is being pulled out of the water as they arrive. The dead man in the car is Sternwood's chauffeur, Owen Taylor, Martin Potter, the guy that was giving Marlowe the stink eye at the estate. Marlowe suspects foul play, but some of the English investigators think it was suicide. Inspector Carson gives background on Taylor, saying that 2 years earlier, Taylor and Camilla had run off to be married. Charlotte came to the police and said it was her idea for the couple to run off. Marlowe asked Carson to leave the General out if possible. Carson says the General is sick because he is pining for the companionship of his son-in-law Rusty. Marlowe tells the inspector that he is not looking for Rusty. Marlowe goes back to Geiger's bookstore. He tells Agnes that he wants to sell something to Geiger. The back door opens. A young man opens the door and pops back inside. Marlowe goes to the back of the store and sees a young man and another man loading large boxes into a van. Marlowe jumps into a cab to follow the van. They lose the van at first but see it in an apartment garage. Marlowe goes to the door and the name on it is Joe Brody. Marlowe returns to his office and Charlotte is waiting for him. He mentions that her husband Rusty was an Irish gun runner. Charlotte wants to talk about Owen Taylor, the dead chauffeur. She is still trying to find out why her father hired Marlowe. Charlotte has a stack of nude photos of Camilla. The blackmailers want £10,000. Charlotte says she can get the money from Eddie Mars, Oliver Reed, the owner of the Cheval Club. Charlotte says Mars will give her the money because she regularly loses money at the club, and her husband Rusty ran away with Mona, who is Mars's wife.
I think I can get the 10,000. After all, I've been a good customer to Eddie Mars. And there is another reason why Eddie should be nice to me. Eddie's wife, Mona, is the woman my husband, Rusty, ran away with. Doesn't that interest you?
I'm not looking for Rusty.
She has a great little body, doesn't she?
Yeah.
You know, you should see mine sometime.
Charlotte tells Marlowe that he should see her naked body sometime as she leaves. Marlowe returns to the murder house and heads to the back. he catches Camila running out of the back. He takes her back into the house and asks who killed Geiger. She acts goofy and says Brody killed Geiger. She is surprised when Marlowe tells her not to worry about the photos. The doorbell rings and Camila runs out. She bumps into Mars and one of his bodyguards. Mars says he wants to see Geiger. Marlowe says that he doesn't know where Geiger is. Mars lets Camila leave. When he sees blood on the floor, he threatens to call the police. Mars doesn't call and says that he is the owner of the house. He says he is not in the pornography business. Marlowe says he will drift, a line that goes back at least to Blood on the Moon 1948. Before he leaves, Marlowe gigs Mars by asking about Mona and mentioning Rusty. Marlowe travels to Joe Brody's house. Marlowe barges in and says, "You have the books, and I have the blackmail marks." Brody pulls a gun, and Marlowe sees Agnes hiding behind a curtain. Brody says he did not kill Geiger. Marlowe says that he knows Brody took the negatives from the murder house. Marlowe is about to get the pictures back when the doorbell rings. Brody gives a gun to Agnes and goes to answer the door. When Brody answers the door, Camilla rushes in with a gun to his throat. Marlowe takes the other gun from Agnes. Camilla is demanding the pictures back. When Camilla is distracted, Brody goes for the gun. It is knocked on the floor as they tussle. Agnes tries to get the gun as Marlowe tries to stop her. Marlowe gets the gun on the floor and all the wrestling stops. He gets the photos from Brody and sends Camilla home. Brody admits that he did the first blackmailing. Marlowe asks Brody about the 2 murders, while Agnes complains about always picking losers. Brody begins the tale from the night of the murder. He was going to force Geiger into a partnership, but he saw Camilla in the front. Geiger went around back and found the Stern Woods Bentley parked there. He said that Owen Taylor entered the back of the house. Inside, Geiger was posing and photographing the nude Camilla. Tyler shot the man 3 times before leaving with the film. Brody followed the fleeing Taylor until he crashed. Brody then took the film from the car. Brody then says that he figured Geiger was dead, so he took possession of all the porn stock. The doorbell rings again and Brody goes to the door. A voice asks if it's Brody and then fires through the door, killing him with 4 shots. Marlowe rushes outside and is fired upon by the young man from the bookstore. Marlowe chases the man in his car as he flees on foot. Marlowe catches the man who is named Carl Lundgren, Simon Fisher Turner. He forces Carl to return to Geiger's home with him. Carl tries to escape outside the house, and Marlowe puts him down with a karate chop to the neck. Marlowe handcuffs Carl inside of the house. Marlowe says either Carl or Mars moved the body. He looks in the bedroom, and Geiger's body is carefully laid out on the bed, so he knows it was Carl that moved the body. Marlowe calls Inspector Carson, and they set up a meeting. Marlowe takes Carl to the police station and turns him into Commander Barker, Richard Todd, for killing Brody. Marlowe tells the story and who killed whom. Marlowe left out Camilla at Brody's and Mars at Geiger's. He says Taylor was a suicide. Inspector Carson says this all started when Rusty disappeared, and he thinks that's what the general actually wanted to find out. Marlowe goes back to his apartment. Inside are Mars and his bodyguard. Mars wants to know if Marlowe kept him out of the story. Mars also thinks he is looking for Rusty. I just realized the bodyguard Reg, Patrick Durkin, is the man that lost the drinking contest to Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark 1981. Mars tells Marlowe to come see him at the club. He leaves with a vague threat. Marlowe calls Norris to leave a message for Charlotte that he has the pictures and everything is all right. Marlowe goes to Scotland Yard and meets with Inspector Gregory, James Donald, about Rusty. Gregory asks if he thinks Mars killed Rusty and Mona. When Marlowe leaves, he is tailed by a man in a car. Marlowe loses the car. Later, Norris calls Marlowe to say the investigation is complete. But Marlowe has now become interested in Rusty. That night, Marlowe goes to the Cheval Club. Reg lets him in to see Mars. Mars says that Charlotte is gambling inside and doing well. Mars tries to pay Marlowe for leaving him out. Marlowe asks if he killed Rusty. Mars then asks if they are still friends. Marlowe asks Mars if he is behind the guy following him. Mars says no. Charlotte is doing great on the roulette table. She wants to bet past the limit, and Mars gives her authorization. She wins £22,000. Marlowe leaves the club and walks down the alley towards his car. He sees the shadow of a man hiding behind the corner. Charlotte comes down with her money, and the man steps out to rob her. Marlowe gets the jump on him. He knows the robber Lanny, Dudley Sutton. Sutton was in the not-to-be-missed film Cockney vs. Zombies 2012. Charlotte is thrilled by the danger and licks her lips like a hungry dog looking at a bone. Marlowe sends Lanny away. Charlotte asks Marlowe about his visit with Mars. He and Charlotte go to a fancy pub. He asks her what Mars is holding over her and introduces a noir term, Lugan, or being on the wrong side of the fence.
Suppose he's the one who sent that Lugan after you?
Lugan?
The guy with the gun.
Are you a Lugan?
A Lugan is on the wrong side of the fence.
Is there a wrong side?
What's Eddie Mars got on you?
You shoot people, don't you, Mr. Marlowe? You're a killer.
Me?
You're one of those quiet, deadly men. No feelings.
You've got enough shady friends to know different.
She thinks Marlowe is a cold-hearted killer. Charlotte starts kissing Marlowe and wants to go to his place. He kisses her and asks what Mars has over her again. She gets super mad and says she would kill him if she could. He drops her at the estate as Norris watches. When Marlowe gets home, Camila is naked in his bed. He forces her to get dressed and leave.
I'm going in the kitchen to make a drink. You want one?
Yes, please.
If you're all dressed when I get back, you get the drink, okay?
Gimme.
No. Not till you get dressed.
Jerk.
She is mad and has the same urge to kill Marlowe as her sister does. In the morning, the man that has been following Marlowe is still watching him. At his office, he gets the payment from the general. Harry Jones, Colin Blakely, the man that has been following him, comes in and admits he's a friend of Joe Brody. Jones says Agnes sent him. He says he has information that would help find Rusty. Jones tells the story of the night Charlotte was out with Mars, Rusty was at the bar, and Mars's wife Mona, Diane Quick, was singing on stage. Jones says Rusty was seeing Mona because his marriage to Charlotte was going poorly. At last, Joan talks about Lash Canino, Richard Boone, a man who wears all brown, has a brown car, and a brown girlfriend. Canino has a cast because he has been shot in the foot.
Yeah, but then a new fella enters the scene. Lash Canino.
Who?
Lash Canino, the brown man. I was in this pub seat collecting bets for Joe Brody. And suddenly, there he is, the brown man. Brown suit, brown shirt, brown car, brown girl he had too.
Mars comes to Canino to take care of a big problem. Jones had told Brody about Canino. Brody then trailed Canino and saw him paid off by Charlotte. Brody was expecting to sell the location of Mona to Mars and then to the general. Jones says Mona is in hiding. He says when Agnes gets the money, she will give the location of Mona. Later, Marlowe goes to a low-rent office building where Brody had an office. He hears Jones and Canino inside the office. Marlowe picks the lock and goes into the back office. Canino wants to know where Agnes is located. He pours a drink and gives it to Jones. Jones dies immediately from the poison in the glass. Canino leaves and the phone rings. It is Agnes. She agrees to meet Marlowe at a park. That night he pays her and she tells him the out-of-town location where Mona is located. Agnes says Brody saw Mona in a blonde wig driving with Canino. Marlowe drives to the location of Mona. Just before he arrives, two of his tires are flattened by a spike someone left in the road. He walks to a conveniently located garage. A man with a double-barreled shotgun lets him inside but doesn't want to fix his tires. Canino comes out of the back and says to fix the tires. Canino gives Marlowe a drink, and Marlowe hesitates before he drinks it. When the mechanic comes back, he and Kano jump and beat Marlowe. When Marlowe wakes, he is tied up in the house and Mona is his guard. Mona reveals that the plan was for her to hide out so the police wouldn't know that Rusty was murdered. When Mona leaves the room, Marlowe tips the chair over and knocks the phone down. When she returns, Marlowe convinces her that the police are on the way and she will be implicated in 2 murders. She cuts him loose but can't remove the handcuffs. Marlowe makes it to his car and gets another gun just as Canino returns. Marlowe stuffs his tie in Canino's gas tank. While inside, Canino roughs up Mona. Marlowe fires 2 shots at the door with his revolver, and Canino returns fire with a machine gun. Canino comes outside holding Mona as a shield. Marlowe hits the car with a rock, and Canino opens fire on his own car. Marlowe lights the gas-soaked tie and the car explodes. Mona escapes. Marlowe kills Canino with 6 shots. 6 plus 2 equals 6. Inspector Carson briefs Marlowe and takes his statement. Mars has also made a statement and he gets away. Marlowe and Carson see Mars go free with Mona. Marlowe goes back to his apartment to get some rest, but he gets a call from Norris that the general wants to see him. When he gets to the estate, the general is sick and in bed. The general tries to pay Marlowe to find Rusty. Marlowe says he will try and find him. Outside, Camilla was shooting darts. He returns her gun that she left at Brody's place. She asks for a shooting lesson. They travel to some old Roman ruins and set up a can on the wall. The thought of firing holes into historic fabric actually offends my archaeological sensibilities. Camilla aims the gun at Marlowe and begins firing. He is not hurt because he has previously loaded the gun with blanks.
I have it, you're cute. It's a good thing I loaded this thing with blanks. I had a hunch what you might do.
He takes Camilla back to the house, and Charlotte starts chewing him out for not caring about her family. Marlowe says that Camilla tried to kill him. Charlotte says that he can't prove that she tried to kill him. He says he is not interested in the attempt on his life, and only cares about when Camilla used the exact location to kill Rusty for the crime of refusing her sexual advances. Charlotte admits that she paid Mars to make up the story about Rusty and Mona running away. Canino was paid to get rid of the body. Marlowe says he doesn't want the money she offers, and she has 3 days to commit Camilla to a mental hospital. Marlowe wants the general to die without knowing how bad his daughters were. He thinks death is the big sleep, and the general will be fine as he dies.
What did it matter where you lay once you were dead? In a stagnant lake or in a marble tower on top of a hill? You were dead. You were sleeping the big sleep. You were not bothered by things like that.
I will be back with the conclusions and the world-famous short summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. I've made no secret how I feel about this movie. Robert Mitchum will always be tops with me. I will be reviewing Farewell My Lovely 1975 soon, with Mitchum playing the same character. These films are important to the rise of Neo-Noir as they are among 5 Raymond Chandler stories that were made during this period and are part of a significant body of work including Gumshoe 1971, The Long Goodbye 1973, The Friends of Eddie Coyle 1973, Chinatown 1974, The Yakuza 1974, The Blackbird 1975, and The Late Show 1977. I did get a little curious about the name Scotland Yard. Searching on Wikipedia, I found out that it is a metonyme. That is, quote, the substitution of the name of an attribute or adjunct for that of the thing meant, unquote. The original police station was at 4 Whitehall Place, but the rear entrance was on Great Scotland Yard. Most people entered from the Scotland Yard side, and over time the police were called by this name. World famous short summary. Private investigation is a young man's job. I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. Don't forget to follow the links in the show notes or from the site to visit our store. We have a lot of Noir designs. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, you can tell a friend, colleague, or family member about the show or leave a review where you get your podcast. It genuinely helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.